The boy hadn't made a sound in 11 months. That was the first thing Nurse Iris Calloway heard when she transferred to the pediatric wing of Whitmore General. Not from the chart, from the other nurses, the ones who lowered their voices in the break room when they talked about room 14. "His name is Noah," one of them had said, stirring her coffee without looking up. 7 years old. Dad brought him in 3 weeks ago for routine monitoring after the accident. The kid just stopped. Doctors say there's nothing physically wrong with his throat. He understands everything. He just won't talk. Iris Calloway had nodded slowly and said nothing. She'd worked pediatrics long enough to know that sometimes a child's silence was the loudest thing in the room. She met Noah on a Tuesday morning in October, when the hallway outside room 14 smelled like antiseptic and someone's leftover oatmeal. He was sitting up in the bed with a crayon in his hand, not drawing, just holding it like he wasn't sure what it was for anymore. Dark eyes. Dark circles under them. A small face that looked like it had been asked to carry too much weight. Iris came in the way she always came in, without fanfare, without that too bright smile some nurses put on like a costume. "Good morning," she said, hanging his chart back on the hook. "I'm Iris. I'll be your nurse this week." Noah looked at her. He didn't look away. Most kids looked away. She busied herself checking the monitor leads, adjusting one that had come slightly loose near his wrist. She didn't make a production of it. She didn't ask him how he was feeling, which she'd learned was one of the most useless questions you could ask a child in a hospital bed. Instead, she glanced at the crayon in his hand, a burnt orange, the kind that ends up in every box but nobody ever picks. "That's a good color," she said. "People underestimate orange." She left it there. No follow-up, no invitation. She finished her notes and walked out. When she came back an hour later with his morning medication, there was a small drawing on the corner of the paper towel on his tray table. A sun. Orange. Iris looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at Noah. He was watching the window. She set the cup down and pulled the marker from her own breast pocket. She always kept one, habit from years of labeling things, and drew something small next to his sun. A cloud. Nothing fancy. Lopsided, really. She put the marker back, picked up the empty cup, left. By the end of her shift, there was a bird on the paper towel. Under the cloud. His father arrived every evening at 5:45. Iris noticed because room 14 was near the nurse's station, and she'd started staying a few minutes past her notes just to finish the chart properly. That was what she told herself, anyway. The truth was she'd begun to notice the sound of dress shoes on linoleum, the specific rhythm of someone who walked fast because he was always running behind and had given up apologizing for it. Daniel Whitfield was not what she expected. She'd read the name on the insurance forms. Whitfield Developments. She'd recognized it the way anyone in the city would. The company's logo was on half the construction scaffolding downtown, clean sans serif letters on green boards. She'd assumed a man like that would have an assistant bring the boy his things, maybe stop by on weekends. Instead, Daniel Whitfield came every evening at 5:45. He sat in the chair that was too small for him and read aloud from whichever chapter they'd left off in the book he kept on the nightstand. He didn't check his phone. He didn't take calls. He just read, in a voice that was quieter than she would have expected from someone who ran a company that reshaped city skylines. The first time Iris actually spoke to him, she nearly walked into him in the doorway. "Sorry," she started. "No, he said at the same time. They both stopped. He was taller than she'd registered from a distance, and he had the specific look of someone who had been tired for so long he'd stopped noticing it. There were shadows under his eyes that matched his son's. "Iris Calloway," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Noah's nurse this week, Daniel Whitfield." He shook it. Firm, brief. "How is he today?" She told him what she could tell him. Vitals stable. Appetite slightly improved. No distress. The medical facts cleanly delivered. He nodded. He looked past her at his son, who was drawing on a new paper towel. They'd upgraded from the original and hadn't looked up. "He drew all day," Iris said, not on the chart. Just something she'd noticed. Daniel's jaw shifted. Something moved across his face that he didn't try to hide and didn't try to show. It just happened like weather. "Yeah, he's got a whole system going. I think it started as a sun and now there might be a city in there." Daniel looked at her then, really looked, and she felt the weight of it the way you feel a door open in a room you thought was sealed. "He used to draw cities all the time," Daniel said quietly. "Before." Iris nodded. She didn't ask what before meant. She already knew. The accident had been in the file 8 months ago. A wet intersection, a truck running a light. Noah's mother had been driving. Noah had been in the back seat. She excused herself and let Daniel walk past her into the room. She stood at the nurse's station for a moment after, writing nothing on the clipboard she was holding. The drawing system evolved. By the end of the first week, Noah had filled 6 paper towels and one corner of the whiteboard in his room with what could only be described as an ongoing city. Buildings. Windows. Tiny figures that might have been people or might have been trees. It was hard to tell. He still hadn't spoken, but his eyes tracked differently now. Less like he was watching something far away, more like he was watching things nearby and deciding whether they were worth his attention. Iris had taken to bringing him a new marker every other day. Different colors. She left them on the tray without comment. He used every single one. One morning she came in and found him frowning at the wall. "Problem?" she said. He looked at the drawing, then at her, and pointed at a building in the corner of the board. It was taller than the others, a little wobbly. "That one giving you trouble?" He pointed again, emphatically. Iris pulled the extra chair over and sat beside the bed, studying the whiteboard with the seriousness it deserved. "I see what you mean," she said. "The proportions are off. That one's leaning like it forgot which way was up." She picked up the green marker she'd brought. "May I?" He considered this. Then he held out his hand for the marker, took it from her, and drew a line she hadn't expected, a straight, clean horizontal at the base of the wobbly building grounding it. He looked at her. Iris stared at it. Then she laughed, a real one, the kind that surprised her. "That's exactly right. You just gave it a foundation. That's Noah, that's actually brilliant." He looked at the board. His mouth did something small and complicated at the corners. Not a smile, not yet, but the outline of one. When Daniel came that evening, Noah pointed him to the building immediately. Iris, passing the open door, watched Daniel crouch down to Noah's level, study the drawing for a long moment, and say very seriously, "Good call on the foundation, bud. I would have done the same thing." She kept walking, but she was smiling. She found out about Whitfield Construction's new hospital wing entirely by accident. It was 3 weeks into Noah's stay, a Thursday, and she was in the break room when one of the other nurses, Deb, who knew everything about everyone, slid a local news pull-up across the table like a dealer laying down cards. "Did you know your room 14 dad is rebuilding the entire east wing of this hospital? Like, as a donation?" Iris looked at the article. Whitfield Developments pledges expansion of Whitmore General Pediatric Center. There was a photo of Daniel at some kind of announcement, shaking hands with the hospital board chair. He looked like he was somewhere else in his head. Iris said. That's all you've got?" Deb pulled the tablet back. "He comes in every single day. The man is basically funding our renovation, and he looks at you like, Deb, like you hung the whiteboard." Iris stood up and picked up her coffee. "I'm going to check on my patients." "Sure you are," Deb said pleasantly. The thing was, it changed something in how Iris saw him. Not in the way Deb meant, not the money part. It was the picture, the way he looked in it. Like a man going through the motions of a public life while carrying something very private and very heavy. She recognized that look. She'd worn it herself after her brother died 4 years ago, and she'd gone back to work because standing still felt worse. She didn't say any of this. She went back to room 14 and found Noah asleep with a blue marker still in his hand, and she eased it out carefully so the cap didn't come off on the sheets. The trouble started with a woman named Sylvia. Sylvia Crane was Daniel's director of public relations, and she appeared in the hallway outside room 14 on a Friday afternoon like a weather system arriving ahead of schedule. She wore a cream blazer, and the specific expression of someone who had never, in her adult life, sat in a plastic hospital chair. Iris was at the nurse's station when she saw her. Then she saw Sylvia walk past the window of room 14, glance in, and keep going to find Daniel at the elevator. She didn't hear what they said. She caught pieces, announcement, optics, the gala next weekend, and Daniel's voice, lower, something that sounded like "Not now, Sylvia." But Sylvia came back later, and this time she stopped at the nurse's station. "You're the nurse assigned to Noah Whitfield?" Sylvia said. Not unfriendly. "Precisely calibrated." "I am," Iris said. "I noticed you spend quite a bit of time in that room, beyond the standard checks." Iris looked at her clipboard. "The patient requires close monitoring." "Of course," Sylvia smiled in a way that didn't involve her eyes. "I just want to make sure everyone is keeping appropriate professional boundaries. Daniel is a very," she chose the word carefully, like picking something off a shelf, "prominent man in a difficult personal situation. He can be susceptible to, well, people who see an opportunity." The break room was very quiet. "I see," Iris said. Sylvia held her gaze for a moment, then turned and walked toward room 14. Iris went back to her charting. Her pen moved steadily across the page. She didn't look up. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself Sylvia was just doing what PR people do, managing narratives, protecting assets. She told herself the hollow feeling in her chest was nothing more than professional irritation. But that evening, when Daniel stopped at the nurse's station on his way out and said, Noah, talk today. He said your name. Iris felt something lurch in her chest that she wasn't sure how to file away neatly. She kept her voice level. That's a really good sign. It was more than that, Daniel said. He looked at her the way he'd looked at his son's drawing the first time, like something had been built where there used to be empty space. He said, Iris fixed it. I asked what? He said, the building. Iris was quiet for a moment. He's going to be okay, she said, and she meant it as a professional assessment, but she meant it as other things too. Daniel nodded slowly. He looked like he was about to say something else. Then his phone buzzed, and the moment closed the way moments do, and he said, good night, and she watched him walk down the hall. It was Sylvia's doing. She'd find that out later. She came in on a Monday to find a hospital administrator waiting for her. A review of her extended patient contact hours. An anonymous concern had been raised about professional appropriateness. Nothing formal, they said. Just something they needed to document. Iris sat across from the administrator with her hands flat on the table and answered every question. Yes, she spent additional time in room 14. She could document the clinical rationale. Nonverbal child showing signs of acute trauma-related selective mutism responsive to low-pressure sensory interaction, including art-based communication. All of it logged, all of it in the chart. The administrator looked at the documentation. He looked somewhat deflated. This all seems completely in order, he admitted. I know, Iris said. She went back to work. She did not go to room 14 first. She went to 3 other patients, documented everything, drank the rest of a cup of cold coffee at the nurse's station. Then Deb appeared beside her and said, very quietly, it was that PR woman. I heard her on the phone. Iris set down the cup. She was not the kind of person who made scenes. She had been raised by a mother who said that composure was the one thing no one could take from you if you didn't hand it over. She had held that composure through things much harder than a hospital administrator's review. But she went home that evening and sat in her apartment and felt, for the first time in a long time, like something that had been quietly good was now broken. She did not go back to room 14 the next day. She requested a shift adjustment, citing personal reasons. She was in the hospital cafeteria 2 days later when she heard the voice, small, careful, like a person testing whether the floor would hold before stepping fully onto it. Iris? She turned. Noah was in a wheelchair. He'd been cleared for supervised trips outside his room. Being pushed by a day-shift aide she recognized. He was looking at her with those dark eyes, his hands around a cup of apple juice, and his face was doing something she hadn't seen it do before, something that looked like worry. Hi, Noah, she said. She kept her voice exactly as it always was with him. Unhurried, not too bright. You didn't come, he said. 2 words, but they landed in the room like something much larger. I had some things to take care of, she said, crouching down so she was level with him. How's the city? He looked at her for a long moment. It needs the green marker, he said. I put a park in. She laughed, and it came out shakier than she meant it to. Good call. Parks are important. She rode the elevator back up with him. She didn't go back to thinking of reasons to stay away. Daniel found out about Sylvia's complaint the way people usually found out about things that were done quietly on their behalf. Through someone who couldn't keep a secret as well as they thought they could. It was one of his junior associates who mentioned it over the phone as a just so you know, and then immediately seemed to wish he hadn't. Daniel sat in the parking garage of Whitmore General for 6 minutes after that call. He knew because he looked at the clock twice. He had built a company from the ground up, starting at 26 years old, with a second-hand set of drafting tools and a business plan he'd revised 47 times. He knew how to read structural integrity. He knew where the load was being carried and where the cracks were forming and what it looked like when someone was quietly undermining a foundation. He went upstairs. He did not go to room 14 first. He found Sylvia in the 3rd-floor conference room she'd been using for gala planning. The conversation lasted 12 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. At the end of it, Sylvia Crane was no longer Director of Public Relations at Whitfield Developments, and whatever she'd expected to protect or prevent or control had been left in the room with her. He took the elevator up to the pediatric floor. Iris was at the nurse's station, writing something in a chart, and she didn't look up immediately because she was finishing her thought, and she had always been someone who finished her thoughts before looking up. When she did look up, she saw him standing on the other side of the counter, and something in his face made her set down the pen. I owe you an apology, Daniel said. You don't, she said. You didn't do it. Sylvia worked for me. What she did, Daniel. She said his first name without thinking about it, which was the first time she had, and they both noticed. It's done. Noah put a park in the city yesterday. He used the green marker. He looked at her for a long moment. He told me, Daniel said, his voice quiet in a way that wasn't soft exactly, but was careful. He also told me that you said parks are important. They are. He's been talking, Daniel said, more and more. The doctors said this morning, they think he'll be ready to go home by the end of next week. Iris nodded. That's good news. That's really good news. I know you were doing your job, he said. But I also know that what you did for him wasn't just your job. She didn't answer that. Not because she didn't have an answer, but because some things were better left as what they were without being classified. The gala is Saturday, he said. The hospital wing announcement. It's a public event, which means He paused. It's the kind of thing I used to dread. But Noah has decided he wants to come. He wants to show someone the architectural model they built for the expansion. He specifically said Iris has to see the proportions. She pressed her lips together. He said that. Proportions was the word he used. I didn't know he knew that word. He's known it for at least 2 weeks, Iris said. Daniel smiled then. A real one. The kind that changed the whole structure of his face and probably hadn't shown up on it very much lately. It looked like someone opening a window in a room that had been closed for a long time. Will you come? He said. For Noah, she said. And maybe, he started. And maybe, she agreed. The gala was held in the hospital's main atrium, which had been strung with warm lights and filled with round tables and the careful optimism of people who believed in building things. The architectural model sat on a pedestal in the center of the room, a precise miniature of the new wing, all clean lines and considered spaces. Noah found her within 4 minutes of her arrival. He was in a navy blazer that looked like someone had recently won an argument with him about wearing it, and he grabbed her hand without ceremony and pulled her directly to the model. Look, he said. The foundation's right. See, it's not leaning, Iris looked. The base was solid, the proportions deliberate. A building that knew where it stood. Perfect, she said. Noah nodded with the gravity of a structural engineer signing off on final plans. Then he looked up at his father, who had materialized beside Iris without her noticing, because she'd been looking at the model. I told you she'd know, Noah said to Daniel. You did, Daniel said. Noah seemed satisfied with this. He released her hand and went to find the dessert table, which had been his secondary objective all along. Iris stood next to Daniel in the warm atrium light, surrounded by the sound of a room full of people who didn't know what the last 2 months had looked like from room 14, from a plastic chair pulled close to a whiteboard, from a nurse's station where someone had learned to recognize a particular rhythm of dress shoes on linoleum. He's going to be okay, Daniel said quietly. He is, Iris said. They stood together in the good noise of it, the rebuilt and the building, the things that had been broken carefully enough that the repair was part of the structure now. Noah came back with 2 pieces of chocolate cake and distributed them without asking whether anyone wanted cake, because some things, in his estimation, were not questions. Iris accepted hers. She looked at the foundation of the model in the center of the room, clean and straight and holding everything up. She thought about orange crayons and paper towels and the way a child's silence could be the loudest thing in a room, right up until the moment it wasn't.